exposed. So the gentleman back there just raised his hand. There are all of the health impacts. Next. So these are the health impacts from the crude. The first one I showed you were the health impacts from the crude. Every one of these except the ones with the star, mutation and birth defects and infertility, have been reported in association with contact or exposure to the crude. And once again, we're 9 months out. So we're watching to see if we start picking up mutations and birth defects and infertility. But do you think anybody's going to call me and say, I had a miscarriage? Or I can't get pregnant? People aren't going to report that. They're going to report skin rashes, respiratory, that whole kidney problems. But these are going to be the two that are going to be the hardest to document associated with the crude. So let's go back to those two populations that were initially identified. And they were identified by myself, Mary B., Paul, and Michael. Crude oil turned into an aerosol when the slick was present in the Gulf of Mexico. It was due to the high winds and the high seas, and it came onshore. And I give an example of when you use a pump hairspray. That's an aerosol that comes out of the pump. So that's what the crude oil was like coming onshore. It moved onshore way before the slick, and remember it only took 9 days for the slick to make it to shore. And it continued to move onshore every time the wind blew from the south, southeast, or southwest, blowing it onshore. People initially called and said they had headaches, nausea, respiratory impact, irritation to the eyes, nose, throat, and lungs, asthma attacks. Those were the complaints. And when I go out and do workshops, I'd start going through the aerosols forming and it's moving onshore, and these are the health impacts, and they go like, oh, that's why I have all these health impacts. I knew I had a headache, I knew I had nausea, but I was just so busy trying to deal with the situation that I didn't correlate it back. As far inland as New Orleans, and you're at mile marker 100 on the river, people in the New Orleans area were reporting these health impacts when the wind blew from the south. If you remember in 2008 when we had the barge cut in half by the ship in New Orleans, and people were complaining about the smells, the odors, and being nauseated, and the health agencies and the environmental agencies said it's not a health threat. Well, these same types of health impacts were associated with the crude blowing inland all the way 100 miles in. Some parents would talk about they'd bring their child to the doctor, and the closer they made it upriver to go to the doctor, the better the child felt. And then when they finished at the doctor and headed south, the child got sicker and sicker and sicker. These health impacts are all along from New Iberia, Louisiana, along Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida, having these huge health impacts on the community that had nothing to do with the spill and had nothing to do with working to clean up the mess. Then we have the fishermen and the cleanup workers. They experience these same health impacts, but much more severe.